They fired me for speaking Spanish at work, said it was unprofessional, that I was making people uncomfortable. 3 months later, immigration showed up at the company's door, and suddenly my phone rang. It was my old boss, begging me to come back. I didn't shout, I just smiled and said, "Now you speak my language." I still remember the exact moment it started to fall apart. It was a Tuesday, late September, the kind of day where the Houston heat hasn't quite let go yet, and the air conditioning in the office building hums like it's barely holding on. I was sitting at my desk in the logistics department, surrounded by stacks of shipping manifests and invoices that needed processing before the end of the week. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered every few minutes, a rhythm I'd gotten so used to that I barely noticed anymore. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Mama. My stomach tightened. She never called during work hours unless something was wrong. I hesitated, looking around the office. Mark, my supervisor, was in a meeting. The others were buried in their screens, headphones on, lost in spreadsheets and conference calls. I picked up the phone and stepped into the break room. The space was empty, just a water cooler, a vending machine that hadn't been restocked in weeks, and a table with coffee-stained chairs that had seen better days. I answered in Spanish. "Mamá, ¿qué pasó?" My mother's voice came through, shaky, weak. She'd been sick for weeks now, something with her lungs that the doctors back home couldn't quite figure out. She didn't speak English, never had, never would. She was 73 years old and had spent her entire life in a small town outside Guadalajara. English was a language for other people, people who left, people like me. She told me she'd been to the clinic again. They wanted her to go to a specialist in the city, but she didn't have the money. She was scared. I could hear it in every breath she took. I stood there, leaning against the wall, speaking softly in the language I grew up with, the language that shaped my first words, my first thoughts, my first prayers. I told her I'd send money. I told her everything would be okay. I told her I loved her. When I hung up, my hands were shaking, not from fear, just from the weight of being so far away from someone who needed me. I walked back to my desk. Mark was standing there, arms crossed, face blank. "Can I see you in my office?" he said. Not a question, a command. I followed him down the narrow hallway, past cubicles where coworkers typed without looking up, past the printer that jammed every other day, past the motivational poster that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work," in bold letters that no one believed anymore. His office was small, cramped, a desk piled with papers, a window that looked out onto the parking lot, a framed photo of his wife and 2 kids at some beach I'd never been to. He sat down and gestured for me to do the same. I sat. He didn't speak right away, just tapped his pen against the desk like he was buying time, rehearsing what he was about to say. "Look," he finally said, "I've been getting complaints." I blinked. "Complaints? About what?" He shifted in his chair. "About you speaking Spanish at work. People feel excluded, like you're talking about them or creating some kind of divide." I stared at him. For a moment, I thought he was joking, but his face stayed serious, even a little uncomfortable, like he knew what he was saying sounded ridiculous, but was committed to saying it anyway. "I was on the phone with my mother," I said slowly. "She's sick. She doesn't speak English. It was a personal call on my break." He nodded like he understood, but his words said the opposite. "I get that. I do. But we have to think about the team dynamic. We have to think about how everyone feels. And right now, some people are uncomfortable. Some people." He didn't name them, didn't give me a chance to defend myself or explain or even understand who these mysterious some people were. Just vague accusations floating in the air like smoke. "So what are you saying?" I asked. "I'm saying we need you to keep things professional, English only in the office, even on breaks." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You're telling me I can't speak my own language during my personal time?" He shifted again. It's better for everyone if we keep things consistent. It's about respect." Respect. The word sat heavy between us. I wanted to ask him if he understood what respect actually meant, if he'd ever been told he couldn't speak the language that lived in his bones, the language his mother sang to him, the language that made him feel like himself. But I didn't. I just nodded and walked out. The rest of that week felt like walking through fog. I went to work, did my job, spoke only English, even when I called my mother during lunch. I sat in my car, windows rolled up, and forced myself to translate my thoughts, my worries, my love into a language that didn't feel like home. The following Monday, Mark called me into his office again. This time, there was someone from HR with him, a woman I'd seen maybe twice before, always carrying a clipboard, always wearing the same tight smile that meant bad news. "We've decided to let you go," Mark said, not even looking at me. "It's just not a good fit anymore. You're not aligning with the company culture." Company culture. Another phrase that meant nothing and everything at the same time. The HR woman handed me a folder. Severance, final paycheck, information about Cobra. All very official, very clean, like they'd done this 100 times before. "You can pack your things today," Mark added. "Security will walk you out." Security, like I was a threat, like I'd stolen something. I stood up, took the folder, and walked back to my desk. I had 5 years of work sitting there, photos of my daughter at her 6th grade graduation, a coffee mug she'd made me in art class that said "Best Mom" in uneven letters, Post-it notes with reminders, inside jokes, the small daily proof that I'd existed in this space. I packed it all into a cardboard box someone handed me without a word. The same coworkers who'd laughed at my jokes during lunch, who'd asked me for help when they couldn't figure out the new software, who'd wished me happy birthday last month, now stared at their screens like I'd already disappeared. I walked through the office with that box in my arms, security trailing behind me like I was being escorted out of a prison. When I got to the parking lot, the sun was blinding. I sat in my car for a long time, box on the passenger seat, hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I just sat there, trying to understand what had just happened. I drove home in silence. No music, no radio, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my own breathing. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat there for another 10 minutes before going inside. My daughter Sophia was at the kitchen table doing homework. She looked up when I walked in, saw the box, and her face changed. "Mom," I set the box down. "I lost my job." She stood up. "What? Why?" I didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell your 12-year-old daughter that you were fired for speaking the language she hears you speak to her abuela every week? How do you explain that the world sometimes punishes you for being exactly who you are? "They said I wasn't a good fit," I said. She hugged me, tight, the kind of hug that says, "I don't understand, but I'm here." And in that moment, that was enough. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through job listings. Administrative assistant, data entry clerk, warehouse supervisor. I applied to everything, rewrote my resume 3 times, each version a little more desperate than the last. I sent out applications until my eyes burned, until the clock said 2 a.m., until I couldn't think anymore. The rejection emails started coming within days. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Your qualifications don't match our current needs. We'll keep your resume on file." Empty words that all meant the same thing. No. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. I took my daughter to school every morning, came home, applied to more jobs, made lunch, applied to more jobs, picked her up, made dinner, applied to more jobs. The routine kept me from falling apart. The savings account I'd carefully built over 5 years started to shrink, first slowly, then faster. Rent, utilities, groceries, car insurance. The numbers didn't lie. Sophia noticed. Kids always do. She stopped asking for things. When we went to the grocery store, she didn't beg for the cereal with the cartoon character on the box anymore. She started choosing the store-brand version without me saying anything. She noticed when I started buying chicken thighs instead of breasts, when I stopped getting the good orange juice, when I started checking receipts twice before leaving the store. One night she asked if we were okay. I told her yes. She didn't believe me, but she nodded anyway. I started applying for jobs I was overqualified for. Retail, fast food, cleaning services, places that didn't care about my bachelor's degree in business administration, places that just needed bodies. I got a few interviews, one at a department store, folding clothes and working the register, one at a restaurant, bussing tables and washing dishes. I showed up on time, dressed professionally, smiled, answered questions, thanked them for their time, and then I waited and waited. The department store hired someone else. The restaurant never called back. By the 3rd month, the panic set in. Real panic, the kind that wakes you up at 3 a.m. With your heart racing and your mind running through worst-case scenarios like a horror movie you can't turn off. What if I can't find work? What if we lose the apartment? What if I have to pull Sophia out of school? What if we have to go back? Back to where? I'd left Mexico 15 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a dream that felt too big for my own skin. I'd worked my way through community college, then state university, all while working 2 jobs and sending money home. I'd learned English by watching sitcoms with subtitles, by reading newspapers at the library, by forcing myself to speak even when I was terrified of sounding stupid. I'd built a life here. Sofia was born here. She'd never even been to Mexico, except for a few short visits to see her abuela. She spoke Spanish at home but thought in English. Her friends were here. Her school was here. Her whole world was here. How could I tell her we might have to leave because I couldn't find work in the country she considered her own? I couldn't. So I didn't. I just kept applying, kept trying, kept pretending everything would work out. One afternoon, I was sitting on the couch, laptop open, scrolling through job postings I'd already applied to, refreshing my email every 5 minutes like some miracle would appear. Sofia came home from school and dropped her backpack by the door. She sat next to me, quiet, watching me stare at the screen. "Mom," she said. "Yeah? Are we going to have to move?" I looked at her. Her eyes were too old for 12, too worried. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "I don't know. You just seem scared." I closed the laptop and pulled her close. "We're going to be okay," I said. "I promise." She nodded against my shoulder. "I don't want to leave. All my friends are here. My school is here. You're here." "We're not leaving," I said. And in that moment, I made that promise real. I didn't know how, but I would figure it out. I always had. That night, after Sofia went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, thinking about everything that had brought me here. I thought about my mother, still sick, still struggling, still waiting for the money I'd promised to send but hadn't been able to yet. I thought about the supervisor who'd looked me in the eye and told me my language was a problem. I thought about the coworkers who turned away when I walked past with that cardboard box. I thought about every job application I'd sent into the void, every rejection, every silent phone. And then, for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not quietly, not politely, but loud and messy and angry. Because I was angry. Angry at a system that had used me when it was convenient and discarded me when I became uncomfortable. Angry at people who claimed to value diversity, but only if it looked, sounded, and acted like them. Angry at myself for believing that if I just worked hard enough, if I just assimilated enough, I would be accepted. But anger, I realized, wasn't enough. Anger was just noise. What I needed was a plan. What I needed was to survive. And survival, I'd learned a long time ago, required more than hope. It required strategy. So I wiped my face, opened my laptop again, and started searching. Not just for jobs anymore, but for resources. Community organizations, legal aid, employment assistance programs. Anything that could help me stay afloat while I figured out what came next. I found a few leads, a nonprofit that helped immigrants with job placement, a legal clinic that offered free consultations, a community center that ran resume workshops. It wasn't much, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. I bookmarked the pages, wrote down phone numbers, made a list of places to call in the morning, and then, finally, I went to bed. Not hopeful, exactly, but not defeated either, just determined. Because that's what survival looks like. Not a grand gesture, not a dramatic turnaround, just one more day, one more step, one more try. The next morning, I woke up early, made Sofia breakfast, and got ready to start again. And that's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Is this Maria?" The voice was familiar, but strained, nervous. I frowned. "Yes, who's this?" A pause, then quieter, almost embarrassed. "It's Mark." My breath caught. Mark. My old supervisor. The man who'd fired me 3 months ago for speaking Spanish. The man who'd stood there with HR and told me I didn't fit the company culture. My first instinct was to hang up, but curiosity kept me on the line. "What do you want?" I said, my voice flat. He cleared his throat. "Look, I know this is unexpected, but we have a situation here, and we really need your help." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You need my help?" "Yes." He sounded desperate now, the professional veneer completely gone. "Maria, please, this is serious. Can you come in? Today?" I looked at Sofia, who was watching me from across the kitchen table, cereal spoon frozen halfway to her mouth. "Why would I do that?" I asked. "You fired me, remember?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, finally, the truth. ICE showed up yesterday. My heart stopped. ICE. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. "They did a raid," he continued, words tumbling out fast now. "Turns out some of the people we hired after you, they weren't legal, fake documents, the whole thing. Now we're under investigation. Half the staff is gone and we're drowning. We need someone who actually knows what they're doing, someone we can trust, someone who's legal." I finished for him. Silence. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Legal." I should have hung up right then, should have told him exactly what he could do with his desperate phone call. But instead, I heard myself say, "I'll think about it." And before he could respond, I ended the call. Sophia was staring at me, eyes wide. "Was that your old boss?" "Yeah." "What did he want?" I set the phone down on the table, my hands shaking slightly. "He wants me to come back." Her face lit up. "That's great, right?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know yet if it was great or if it was just another trap disguised as an opportunity. Before you go, I want to know what you're thinking right now. Drop the word justice in the comments if you think I should have hung up on him. And if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe. There's so much more to come. I didn't call him back that day, or the next. I let him sit with his desperation the way he'd let me sit with mine for 3 months. Every time my phone rang and I saw that same number, I let it go to voicemail. He left 4 messages, each one a little more frantic than the last. "Maria, please, we really need to talk." "Maria, I know you're upset, but this is urgent." "Maria, the company is in serious trouble. We can't operate without proper staff." "Maria, please, I'm sorry, just please call me back." I listened to each message once, then deleted it. Sophia asked me every day if I'd made a decision. I told her I was still thinking. But the truth was, I wasn't thinking. I was feeling the weight of every rejection email, feeling the humiliation of walking out with that cardboard box, feeling the fear of not being able to pay rent, feeling the anger of being told my language, my identity, my very existence was a problem. And now, suddenly, I was the solution. It was almost funny. Almost. On the 4th day, I finally called him back. "Maria," he answered immediately like he'd been sitting by the phone waiting. "Thank you for calling. Can you come in? We really need to—" "No," I said. He stopped. "No? If you want to talk, we talk on my terms. Not in your office. Not on your time. Mine." There was a pause. I could almost hear him recalculating, adjusting to this new dynamic where he wasn't in control. "Okay," he said carefully. "Where?" "There's a coffee shop on Westheimer. 2 o'clock tomorrow. Just you." "I'll bring Linda from HR. Just you," I repeated. "Or we don't talk at all." Another pause. Then, quietly, "Okay." I hung up and sat there for a moment staring at my phone. Sophia came into the living room, backpack slung over one shoulder, ready for school. "Did you talk to him?" "Yeah." "Are you going back?" I looked at her. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out what they're offering." She smiled. Not a big smile, just a small one. The kind that said she trusted me to figure it out. "Love you, Mom." "Love you too, Mika." After I dropped her off at school, I drove around for a while, no destination, just moving. I passed by the office building where I used to work, the same parking lot where I'd sat in my car 3 months ago trying to process what had just happened. It looked the same. Gray, industrial, unremarkable, but something about it felt different now. Maybe because I wasn't walking out in shame. This time, I was walking back in with power. The next day, I got dressed carefully, not desperate, not trying too hard, just professional, confident. I wore the blazer I'd bought for my first interview at that company 5 years ago, back when I thought hard work and competence were enough. I arrived at the coffee shop early, ordered a black coffee, and sat at a table by the window. Mark showed up at exactly 2 o'clock. He looked terrible. Bags under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, tie slightly crooked. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Good. He sat down across from me, no coffee, no pleasantries. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. I didn't respond, just waited. He rubbed his face. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. We're in trouble. Real trouble. The ICE raid took out 1/3 of our staff. The ones they didn't detain quit because they were scared. We're behind on every contract, clients are threatening to leave, and corporate is breathing down my neck. And you need me to fix it," I said flatly. "Yes." I took a sip of my coffee. "Why should I?" He blinked. "What? Why should I help you? You fired me, told me I didn't fit your culture, made me feel like I'd done something wrong just by existing. So why should I come back and save you?" He looked down at the table. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, quietly, "You're right. What we did was wrong. What I did was wrong. Keep going." He looked up. "I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I should have told those people that speaking Spanish wasn't a problem, that they were the problem. But I didn't. I took the easy way out, and I fired you because it was simpler than dealing with uncomfortable conversations." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first real thing he'd said in years. "What are you offering?" I asked. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Your old position back, with a raise, 20%. I opened the folder and scanned the numbers. It was a significant increase, more than I'd made before, but it wasn't enough. Not good enough, I said. He looked panicked. Maria, that's already more than... I want supervisor status, not just my old role. I want a title that reflects what I'm actually going to be doing, which is cleaning up your mess. He hesitated. I'll have to get approval. Then get it. And one more thing. What? I want a formal policy in writing that protects employees from discrimination based on language. I want it stated clearly that speaking languages other than English during personal time, breaks, and non-work-related calls is not only allowed, but protected, and I want it posted in every department. He stared at me. That's a big ask. Then I guess you'll have to figure it out on your own. I stood up, grabbed my purse, and started to walk toward the door. Wait. He stood up too, nearly knocking over his chair. Okay, I'll make it happen. I turned back. When? Give me 2 days, I'll have everything in writing. I studied his face. He looked desperate, yes, but also genuine. Or maybe I just wanted to believe he was. 2 days, I said. And if I don't hear from you by then, I'm done. He nodded. You will, I promise. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Not power, not revenge, just control. Over my life, over my choices, over my future. 2 days later, Mark emailed me a formal offer letter, supervisor position, 25% raise, more than I'd asked for. Full benefits. And attached was a new company policy signed by the CEO, explicitly protecting employees' rights to speak any language during personal time and breaks, with clear consequences for anyone who violated it. I read it 3 times. Then I called him. I'll start Monday. That weekend, I told Sophia. She hugged me so hard, I thought my ribs might crack. I'm so proud of you, Mom, she whispered. And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I'd done something right. If you're still watching, thank you. I know this is a long story, but the best part is coming. Hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss what happens next. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. I woke up before my alarm, the kind of wakefulness that comes from nerves and anticipation mixed together. I made coffee, packed Sophia's lunch, and got dressed in the same blazer I'd worn to meet Mark. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different, stronger, less afraid. Sophia noticed too. At breakfast, she said, "You look like a boss, Mom." I laughed. I guess I am now. The drive to the office felt surreal. Same streets, same route, same parking lot, but everything had changed. When I walked through the front doors, the receptionist looked up and did a double take. Maria. Hi, Jenny. She smiled, genuine and warm. Welcome back. I signed in, got my new badge, this one said supervisor, and made my way to the second floor. The office looked exactly the same, but it felt emptier. Desks that used to be full were now vacant. The energy was different, quieter, tense. Mark was waiting for me near my new desk, not my old cubicle, but a real office with a door and a window. He shook my hand, formal, professional. Glad to have you back. Let's get to work, I said. He walked me through the chaos. Shipments delayed, invoices lost, clients angry. It was worse than he'd described on the phone, but I knew this company. I knew these systems. I knew how to fix it. So I did. I spent the first week rebuilding, reorganizing schedules, reaching out to clients personally to reassure them, training new staff who were hired to replace the ones who'd been taken by ICE. It was exhausting, but it felt good, like I was reclaiming something. By the second week, the office started to stabilize. Orders were going out on time. Clients stopped threatening to leave. The panic in Mark's eyes faded, replaced by something close to relief. But not everyone was happy I was back. There were whispers, sideways glances. A few people who used to sit near me now avoided eye contact. One afternoon, I overheard 2 of them talking in the break room. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls were thin, and they weren't exactly being quiet. "Can you believe they brought her back?" one said. "After everything?" "Guess they didn't have a choice," the other replied. "Still, it's awkward." I stood there for a moment, coffee cup in hand, debating whether to walk in and confront them or just let it go. I chose the latter, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't owe them anything. Not my anger, not my energy, not my time. Besides, I had work to do. Real work. A few days later, I was in my office reviewing a logistics report when there was a knock on the door. I looked up. It was David, one of the senior staff members who'd been there longer than me. He was one of the ones who'd looked away when I was walked out 3 months ago. Hey, he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Can I talk to you? Sure, come in. He sat down, hands folded in his lap like a kid in the principal's office. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for not saying anything when you got fired. I should have spoken up. I studied him. Why didn't you? He shrugged. I don't know. Fear, I guess. Didn't want to make waves. Didn't want to be next. I nodded slowly. And now I realized that staying silent made me part of the problem. It was a simple admission, but it meant something. Not everything, but something. Thank you for saying that, I said. He nodded and left, and I sat there thinking about how many people stay silent because it's easier, because it's safer, because they don't think it's their fight. But silence, I'd learned, was its own kind of violence. Over the next few weeks, things continued to improve. The company stabilized, new hires were properly vetted, clients returned, and slowly, the office started to feel less like a war zone and more like a workplace again. But I didn't forget what had happened. I didn't forget the humiliation, the fear, the months of uncertainty. And I made sure no one else would have to go through what I went through. I started holding monthly meetings with the staff, creating space for people to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. I worked with HR to implement the new language policy, making sure everyone understood it and that violations would be taken seriously. And I made it a point to speak Spanish whenever I needed to, on the phone with my mother, with other Spanish-speaking staff, during my lunch break. Not because I was trying to prove a point, but because it was my right, and no one said a word. One day, about 2 months after I'd returned, I was sitting in my office when Mark knocked and came in. Got a minute? He asked. Sure. He sat down looking uncomfortable again. I just wanted to thank you for coming back, for fixing this mess. We wouldn't have survived without you. I leaned back in my chair. I know. He laughed, short and surprised. Yeah, I guess you do. Is that all? No. Actually, corporate wants to recognize what you've done. They're talking about a promotion, regional supervisor, overseeing multiple locations. I raised an eyebrow. When? Next quarter, if you're interested. I thought about it. A bigger role, more responsibility, more money, more power to make sure what happened to me didn't happen to anyone else. I'm interested, I said. He smiled. Good. I'll let them know. After he left, I sat there for a long time, looking out the window at the parking lot where I'd once sat in my car with a cardboard box, wondering if my life was over. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, I picked up Sophia from school and took her out for ice cream. We sat in a booth at her favorite place, the one with a ridiculous Sunday menu and the jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. Mom, she said, spooning chocolate fudge into her mouth. You seem happy. I smiled. I am. Good. You deserve to be happy. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. So do you, mija. And in that moment, sitting in a sticky booth with my daughter, eating overpriced ice cream and listening to an old Madonna song, I realized something. I'd won. Not because they'd hired me back, not because they'd apologized or given me a promotion, but because I'd refused to let them make me small. I'd refused to let them take away my voice, my language, my identity. I'd refused to disappear. And that, more than anything else, was the real victory. A few weeks later, I was sitting in my office when I got a call from my mother. She sounded better, stronger. The specialist had finally figured out what was wrong, and with the money I'd been able to send her, she was getting treatment. Mija, she said, her voice warm and full, I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of you too, Mama. You never gave up. I learned that from you. She laughed, the kind of laugh that makes everything feel okay, even when it's not. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment thinking about everything that had brought me to this point. The firing, the struggle, the fear, the anger, the choice to come back, the decision to stand my ground. It hadn't been easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. And now, sitting in my office with my name on the door and my language protected by policy, I finally understood something I'd been searching for my whole life. I didn't need their acceptance. I didn't need their approval. I just needed my own. That evening, as I drove home, I passed by the coffee shop where I'd met Mark months ago, the place where I'd laid out my terms, where I'd taken control, where I'd decided that I was worth more than they'd ever given me credit for. I smiled, and I kept driving, because the story didn't end there. It was still being written by me, in my own words, in my own language, on my own terms, and no one, not Mark, not the company, not anyone, could take that away from me. So, what do you think? Did I make the right choice by going back, Or should I have let them sink? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. There are so many more stories like this, and I can't wait to share them with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.